Okay, so we were discussing the typical controlled practice activities, such as gap fill activities, multiple choice activities, categorizing or classifying words into groups, exercises where students have to match, sentence transformation, gap texts for students to fill in the gaps with the right preposition or any word, for example, and also sentence reordering. Um, Now I would like to move on to another very important thing to consider, which is or which has to do with controlled practice rules. It's really very important that you always provide examples. If you give them a controlled practice activity to do, you must never, ever, ever forget to provide students with examples. By checking on an example, students know how to deal with the activity. As you can see on the screen, we've got scaffolding, which is a very, very important word. You must bear in mind that in controlled practice, in the controlled practice stage, you have just presented something new. So now students are going to give it a try for the first time. So it's really very important that you provide examples as a way of scaffolding. The other very important thing to do is modeling. This is a word which is related to scaffolding. Modeling is showing students how, all right? Normally, in face-to-face classes, you have the opportunity to model it. You should be modeling, showing them how. Now, how can you do this remotely? Well, I've been mentioning this all throughout. If you have the possibility of providing online teaching to your students, whether it is synchronous, that means that we have, for example, a class using Zoom, it's happening, and there is interaction between you and the students. If you have that possibility, do modeling in that moment. But you can also do it through asynchronous online teaching. This was the case of when you record yourself, okay? You record yourself presenting something new and you model it, you show it, you provide examples. Again, these are technology-based possibilities. If you do not have the possibility and you have to include it in your remote tasks, make sure that you include examples for students to rely on when they have to deal with the controlled practice activities. Something that we've been mentioning from the very beginning today, the importance of contextualizing, okay? If you're teaching vocabulary, if you're teaching grammar, if you're teaching a reading strategy, make sure you provide a context. Make sure that your lessons are topic based. There is a topic at the heart of your lesson that is going to provide a meaningful context. And make sure that that choice of topic, that choice of context is meaningful for the students that you are teaching. And another golden rule to remember is that you must always move from very restricted to somewhat restricted, always remembering that restrictiveness is a characteristic of the controlled practice stage. So I'm gonna give you some examples. All right. So for example, here we've got a controlled practice activity in which students have to build up sentences using simple past and past perfect. They have just been presented, okay, past perfect, okay, in opposition to simple past. Right after the presentation, students will have to build up sentences. And as you can see, we get started providing students with an example of what they have to do. wake up, hear a noise. So students have to think, what actually happened first? First, the person heard the noise, then the person woke up. So she woke up because she had heard a noise. Normally, a student might read the instructions, and they might be a little bit puzzled, but the moment they see an example can definitely help. Here, for example, now students have been working with giving directions and working with the places in town. So it says complete the questions and answers. Excuse me, how can I get to the hotel? So students will have to use a city map, and we are providing an example. Walk across Preston Street. The hotel is opposite the cinema. We provide the examples so that then students can engage in practice. One more example to discuss, pay attention. These are the things my friends like and don't like doing. Ask and answer questions about them. We've got for kids, Marcus, Alice, Brandon, and Megan, and we've got the things that they like doing and the things they don't like doing. And then we tell them, are these sentences true or false? If they are false, you've got to correct them. Of course, when they correct them, they will be using the target language. We provide the example. Brandon likes running and playing football. It's false. Brandon doesn't like running, but he likes playing football. Students pay attention to the example, and then they are ready to go. More, pay attention to the adjectives in brackets and write the comparative form. This comic book, so before students plunge into controlled practice, we provide an example. My sister is taller than my brother. Don't be afraid of providing even more than one example, especially in this remote teaching and learning context. Remember that most of the time our students will be engaged in controlled practice without our direct supervision. So the more scaffolding we provide, definitely the better. And here we've got some kids, and Mike is taller than Louis. Louis is taller than Jane, but Mike is the tallest. So providing examples, highlighting the structure you want them to notice and remember, these are very useful ways of scaffolding. After the example, then students have to write sentences. So they've got to compare things or items of clothing according to their price, or animals according to their size, or people according to their weight. So they have to say who, or for example, or what is cheaper than or more expensive, or which one is the cheapest or the most expensive. So they've been provided with an example, and now there they go. More examples also of controlled practice. I was mentioning before this question of classifying or sorting words. Like, for example, here they've got to complete a chart. They are provided with the verb in the infinitive, and they have to provide the verb in the past. And then, of course, they have to sort or classify the verbs depending on whether they are regular or irregular. These type of activities are the type of activities we need to provide our students within this controlled practice stage of the lesson. And again, for example, put the words in order to build sentences. This is, so for example, night spaghetti she last ate. So it's very restricted if you pay attention, but this is definitely the first step after something new has been presented. Eventually, we're going to get students to have a little bit of more freedom, but this stage in which restrictiveness is the main word is absolutely important. In this remote contexts. And it is a characteristic of self-study guides. Remember that when we design remote tasks for our students, it's really very important that these remote tasks have some characteristics of self-study guides. I usually recommend giving these reminders, all right? So we are reminding our students that we use on plus the day of the week, in plus the month of the year, and we provide examples once again, like, when do you have music classes? I have music classes on Wednesdays. When do you have holidays? I have holidays in July and January. So we give them the reminder and we provide examples. And then, of course, there we go to control practice, completing the sentences using on or in. Now, we have just discussed this stage where we are riding or beginning to practice riding the bike, and we made reference to controlled practice being the instance in which somebody begins to ride a bicycle with the training wheels. So what we're going to do now, all right, is we have already checked that our students are doing quite a good job riding their bicycles with the two training wheels. So what we will be doing now is we're gonna remove one training wheel, all right? They are still not ready. They are still not ready for our removing the two training wheels. We are removing only one. And that is what we call less controlled practice. Stage in between controlled practice and freer practice, all right? Let's talk a little bit about less controlled practice, or this stage in between. Less controlled activities are designed to allow students to use language with a little bit of flexibility. Remember that restrictiveness was the characteristic of controlled practice. Now we are letting go a little bit. That's why in this bicycle analogy, we are removing one of the training wheels. Although there is a little bit more of flexibility, although we are letting go a little bit more, target language is always the focus, all right? We need to remember this. So if you pay attention to these typical reminders that are so important in remote tasks, I think they are very important in general, but in this remote context, they are really, really important to students. We are reminding them to use on plus a date. So when is your birthday? It is on the 15th of April. It is on April the 15th, reminding them that that is how we say it. And then, of course, we are giving them the opportunity to practice the dates. And if you pay attention, we are asking questions. What day is it today? When is your birthday? When is your mom or your dad's or your brother or sister's or your friend's birthday? And students have to practice the structures before. Why are we saying that this is a little bit more, a little bit freer, if you want it? Well, because we don't have, for example, we don't give them the dates and they have to unscramble the words to give the date. That would be very restricted. We are giving them the possibility to build the whole sentence. In that way, we are letting go a little bit, but still the language structure that we are working on is the focus. So for example, look at the city map and write and say sentences about it. Okay, so we've got the bakers and the butchers, and students have to write the bakers is next to the butchers and the fire station. They have to look at the city map and they have to write the whole of the sentence. Answer the following questions. Where is the cinema? Where is the animal hospital? Where is the school? Where is the salon? Still, we are working on prepositions of place. Still, we are working on this. Or can you see? But we are letting go a little bit. We are giving them a little bit more of language learner responsibility, if you want it. Let's move on to video 3.